What's up, everybody? 511 family. Awesome to be back with you this morning. We got a little bit of a weird week because my co-host, Jarrett Branch, has obligations, and I'm going to just leave it at that because he didn't give me permission to say what those obligations were. But last couple of days, he hasn't been able to be with us. I believe he'll be back with us tomorrow, though. So anyway, guys, thank you all for watching. As always, make sure to share, like, subscribe, and send this to a friend or family member that you think might get something out of this. Today, we're talking with one of 511's newer members, family, as you were, Viv Ivy. And Viv, always great to be here with you. I met Viv online, actually. I found a video, which I think we got to share the link to that video. It was kind of like your what do you call it? Landmark, trademark video or whatever.
I guess. Kind of my debut onto the internet, maybe.
Yeah. Just kind of telling your story a little bit. And so we'll share the link for that. But it got shared out. I think it was by someone on X, goes by the handle Insurrection Barbie. Are you familiar with her, Viv?
I am, because I hadn't heard of her before.
She shares a lot of fire content. So yours was one of them. But a lot of times, what I like to, when I feel like something tugging at me, I'll go down the rabbit hole. And it took me a little bit to find you, but we found you, and we've been connecting ever since, doing collaborations and stuff together. So wanted to introduce all of you guys to Viv and have her tell her story, because you see she's wearing the MAGA hat now. She's repping the brand, but she wasn't always a MAGA believer. So Viv, again, awesome to be doing this with you. I'm pumped to actually be able to do the first official solo episode with you.
Yeah, for sure. And it's the first time anyone's interviewed me about my story. So I'm curious about what your biggest questions are, or what sparked your interest the most with, especially that video that you were just talking about.
Yeah. So we're going to do that. We're going to get into a little bit of your story. We're going to get into a little bit of Viv's story. And then we're going to also spend some time breaking down, we might have to do this in two parts, but we're going to break down a little bit of the CNN interview and see if we can't get our video canceled online here. Because we fight that every day, don't we, Viv?
Yep, I'm good at that. Been through that this morning. You throw facts at them and they're saying, nope, I don't like that much.
Yeah, and some particular platforms are more difficult than others. Let's just leave it at that. So
I'm discovering a lot. The more I post, the more I'm aware of what platforms are biased. So
yeah, so let's get into a little bit, Viv. Let's just start with your story, your background, how you came to be a MAGA supporter. And champion? I would say a MAGA champion, and I think you're like, what champion? What does that mean? So when I say that, I think there's a business term that someone that is in it for the cause is someone we refer to as a champion. So you're in it for the cause. We know that. But sure. Unlike many people we speak to, especially in the Blexit community and some of the others, you legitimately were not always a MAGA supporter. You weren't always a conservative. You came over to the side. You actually took the red pill. So yeah. How did that end up happening?
Well, as you said, and still to this day, Trump's the only Republican I've ever voted for. We'll see how that goes in the future. But prior to 2020, I had been a lifelong Democrat, and I wasn't happy with just being a Democrat. I lived down in Arkansas, in a pretty red state, and I decided, actually after watching the show Portlandia, it's funny stuff, but anyways, I decided I wanted to move to Portland, Oregon. And I wanted to be somewhere a little bit more open, a little bit more progressive, I guess I would say. Shortly after moving to Portland, I became a vegan. No one really talked me into it. I just had started mingling with some of the LGBTQ people, and many of them were vegan because I partook in a lot of activism, making signs and stuff for a lot of these people that would go do sit-ins, peaceful type protests in the Capitol or in parks, whatever the deal may be. And I met a lot of vegans, and I started hearing about documentaries and things that, may pique my interest. But I ended up watching some of them, and I decided, I'll try it. I'll be vegan. We'll see what happens. And with that, I ended up being a vegan activist. When I get into something, I'm all in. I'm all in or nothing at all.
Yeah,
And
you
I've
are.
always been that way. So I became a vegan activist, and by that, I partook mostly in a group called Anonymous for the Voiceless. It's, in my opinion, even as someone who's not vegan anymore, it's a very beautiful group. What they do is they'll do little printouts of photos, or they'll take little like tablets, little laptop tablets, and they'll go stand in a square somewhere on a sidewalk, not yelling at anybody, making any kind of noise, impeding people's ability to walk by and ride their bikes by and stuff like that. They'll get out of the way and they'll go stand in a square, and they'll just inform the public, the general public, of kind of the horrors that are happening in factory farming, because that's something that even most meat eaters are like, yeah, a lot of these um, chemicals and things and a lot of the way of life in this factory farming's bad. So I did that. I did that for a few years, and I started meeting a lot of other, I would say, BLM and Antifa type activists. And the longer I hung out with these people, the more I realized how radical things were getting. I had been aware of BLM and Antifa since I was a teenager, because I had partaken in LGBTQ activism for a very long time, even in Arkansas. And even very young, I had heard about BLM and Antifa, and I was aware that Antifa was not a peaceful movement, just from things that I was hearing in the LGBTQ rallies. And anyways, I kind of came face to face with a lot of these people, and I started realizing that I started paying close attention to what's on my local news, what was going on in Portland, and then later Seattle when I moved to Seattle. And I'm seeing them call a lot of the violent riots peaceful protests, and they are dismissing the fact that there was an existence of Antifa. There were, I will say at specific times, they were very focused on Proud Boys and calling Proud Boys for being a violent movement. Yet where I was located in the Pacific Northwest, our problem was Antifa. And they were backing a lot of politicians. Kamala, our governor here in Washington, Jay Inslee, the Seattle mayor at the time was backing it, Jenny Durkin, as well as the Ted Wheeler down in Portland. And I had seen them kind of shrug off the violence, and I started being very suspicious of that. I wasn't a fan. I've never been a fan of violent tactics, blocking traffic, impeding anyone's ability to travel. Yeah, I'm all for activism for anything that you're about, but don't cause harm to anybody around you to do it, right? So I started personally viewing that as a threat to the safety of the communities in which this was happening, because I felt like most of the government officials were looking the other way, and the only people who were really doing anything were the local police, but yet they were kind of being shunned. And in many cases, they were being kept from doing their jobs, or if they arrested someone for, let's say, violent behavior or destruction of property, the DA would just let them out immediately afterwards, or the prosecuting attorney. So I started seeing that, and then I started experiencing rhetoric that I thought was harmful within the communities, as well as I would say extreme bullying in a way. Even within the far left amongst themselves, they would frequently ban words, or they would all of a sudden just decide a certain word or a certain ideology is hateful, and they would kind of gang up on their own, I guess is the best way to put it. And those things started really concerning me. And I was pretty deep on the, Donald Trump is a racist. His supporters just don't know what they're supporting ordeal. I agreed with him on all of that. But the more I saw the news frame a lot of this bad stuff that was happening as good and as positive, I started questioning other things that they were potentially misleading or misguiding about, just flat out lying sometimes. And I started questioning the narrative that I had been fed by these same people about Donald Trump and his supporters, as well as his policies and kind of the threat that they were calling it. They still call him a dictator. And the more I paid attention, the more I realized, I've been lied to about Donald Trump as well, and he's not that bad. And then in 2020, it all came to a head with a Chaz Chop there in Seattle, where Antifa and BLM took over several city blocks and a police station for several weeks, and that just was awful. If you're not aware of it, you should look into it. It was kind of just a bad time for a lot of our locals. And after seeing that, as well as still hating Donald Trump at the time, I wouldn't say hating him, but I wasn't going to vote for him. I had no plans of voting for him, even though I was kind of starting to understand a lot of the things that I had been told about him was very biased and flat out wrong. And I watched the 2020 Democratic debates, and I was like, I think it was 29 people technically over a course of a couple days debate, and the answers that they were giving to me, even as a vegan, a vegan LGBTQ woke activist, I would gladly have called myself woke and told people to wake up. You aren't paying attention. You need to wake up. I was definitely woke in a sense, and even I rejected a lot of the things that I heard within the Democratic Party, and I thought they're just too far left for me. I've mentioned to you before, I really liked Tulsi as well. A lot of us wokies really liked Tulsi, but then they ran her off for multiple reasons, and that ultimately ended up turning me to Donald Trump. That, and then a lot of the COVID mandates. I won't go much into that unless you want me to, but the way he handled the COVID mandates, as well as the way the Biden administration ended up.
Nothing's off limits, Viv.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
unless you're like, I know this will get you canceled.
Yeah, okay. Well, the whole narrative that Donald Trump was a dictator or going to be a dictator, I think he showed us a lot during COVID, especially in 2020 when all the riots were going down. He showed us that he wasn't just going to willy-nilly send the National Guard in. He gave the mayors and the governors the chance to make that decision themselves. He also refused to implement federal mask mandates, vaccine mandates, even though at that time the vaccine was still in the works behind the scenes. But he spoke on it some. He had no intention on mandating any of it. In fact, he did what he did with Roe v. Wade. He's like, I'm going to give this power back to the states, which is closer to the people, which I personally thought was great. So it's just another thing that kind of woke me up to him. But ultimately, I ended up voting for Trump. And it took me, I would say I wasn't a huge Trump fan even then. I just thought he's the lesser of the two evils that I'm looking at right now. After not voting in 2016, as far as for the president, I voted for local state officials, but I didn't vote for the president because I saw Hillary and I thought, I don't like Hillary. She's not far enough left for me. I liked Bernie at the time. But after living in Portland and Seattle for a while, I'm like, I don't think I'm a Bernie person either. I think this is all a little too far left and none of it really makes much sense to me. But I went from a Bernie supporter to a Trump supporter, and here I am now.
That's interesting. I wonder how many people have had a similar journey. And I talked to a lot of people that when they found out, really when they started paying attention, they switched sides. But I don't think that you necessarily like a lot of the people that I talked to, they always had the same values, and they moved over to the MAGA side. Mm-hmm. I think, and you tell me if I'm wrong, Viv, but I think you actually changed some of the way you thought about things, unlike some of the other people I talked to, that they didn't necessarily change the way they thought about things. They just realized which side actually agreed with the things they already thought about.
Yeah. Oh, I'd say that was true, for sure. Certainly the thought, I would say global warming was a big one. They sucked me in with that for a little bit. And I was hardcore thinking that the world's just going to end, if we don't just do something about it, and it should be our number one issue. I was a hardcore advocate. I wouldn't even say for open borders, but I certainly was someone who would be highly offended if you use the term illegal immigration. And if I was someone who thought that it was a racist ideology until I really started thinking about it, of course. And I thought, well, it actually makes sense. But I would say it was more a lack of critical thinking or paying attention to what was really going on and listening to a lot of this feel-good utopian ideology that comes from, I would say, the Democratic Party, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. The good vibes. The good vibes got me, and I didn't put a lot of thought into a lot of things. I'll be honest, but I did fall in line with them on many, many issues, and now I tend to fall the other way. Or even if perhaps I still agree with them on certain things, I can see both sides a lot better now. I can understand where certain people think certain things may be harmful. if
Well,
that
and
makes
I
sense.
remember there was a not that long ago, like in the past couple weeks, like we had a conversation. You said, "Well, I don't agree with you guys on everything." I was like, "Well, that's okay."
Yeah, yeah, totally.
And you don't have to agree with. And guess what? Not everybody on my team agrees with it. Darius
Yeah.
in there has voiced his concerns about things that I've said. I'm like,
Mhm.
that's okay. This is my show, so I'm going to speak my opinion, but that doesn't mean that anybody else's is invalid. They may
Yeah.
be factually incorrect, but
Yeah.
you're entitled to your opinion. That
sure.
doesn't. But I think that's one of the big kind of like differences between the two parties. It's like liberals, and it just happens to be blue and red behind me. Liberals, they're like, no, you got to agree with us on everything, and if you don't, then we're going to excommunicate you from the Church of Liberalism. And conservatives are like, all right, just think freely, think for yourself, think critically, and come to your own conclusions. At least that's how I feel about it. Now, I'm probably more stronger on the red than some, but not. I'm not extreme out there. Like I'm not an extremist. I would say in any way.
I haven't got that vibe at all. Yeah, I mean, I get along with people who identify as conservatives. I wouldn't identify myself as a conservative. I would say I'm more as a moderate. When I take the political test, I come up as a libertarian or ambivalent right. As far right as it's about
That's
as far
what I
right
would
as I
have
go as ambivalent right.
labeled you as if we had to put a label on it.
Yeah, but I do feel as I would say I definitely went from left to moderate. That's more accurate than saying I went from left to conservative, even though I tend to agree. There's not hardly anything I disagree with conservatives on. I just have to have. I just personally have a little bit more of a libertarian point of view.
Mm-hmm.
You know if that makes sense. But for sure, what you were saying, the left is. You subscribe to every single thing, every single new thing. Like now, if you don't subscribe to the pro-Hamas crap, you're really not woke enough for them. You don't fit in that stay woke narrative that Kamala's pushing herself, even though she's like, oh, I'm not going to cave to these type of people. These are the same people she caved to as far as like BLM in Seattle, and she cheered them on. The violent anarchists that are behind these movements, it's the same people just jumping from one to another. If we ourselves decided we're going to start a movement tomorrow over banning soda pop, right? And there's going to be 10,000 of us out there. I guarantee you Antifa would be there somewhere wreaking havoc, and then we ourselves are going to be labeled as a violent group. It's more one-sided. It gets brushed off when the left's doing it more so than when if the right were to do it and those people were to commit crimes, like you could talk about January 11th or January 6th, I guess, but they tend to frame it as in the right's violent if there's violence during any sort of right-wing or centered type protest, I guess we should say. Whereas if there's any sort of violence in the left, it's just peaceful and it never even happened. No matter it just never happened. You're crazy, and if you call it out, you're racist and all the other phobes that we could go down the list all day long.
I feel like the thing that you left out there was that you prescribe to every single thing that they tell you to, right? That you're told to. And the big question is, well, who's they?
Yeah. I ask myself that question sometimes. I don't know. The Democratic Party, the elites, the mainstream narrative. But, I will say a lot of and I don't know where it originally stemmed from, but a lot of the rhetoric that I've heard specifically, as well as, I guess I would say the actual progressive movements where you can see progressivism, whether it be for gay rights or trans rights or, abortion, whatever, you see them moving further left. But as someone who's participated in these LGBTQ and BLM protests and stuff, like been there, the vegan protests, and I can say it seems to me that the ideologies start on the streets with these people, almost in a sense, because I will hear when in say 2000 and when would it have been 2006, were you hearing anything about pronouns? The general person heard nothing about there being more than two pronouns, right?
Like, I mean, I don't feel like I heard about it until like 2020.
Yeah. Well, see, in 2006, I was hearing about it in Arkansas. in Arkansas as a young teenage girl was hearing about it in these LGBTQ they were peaceful at that point because Arkansas wasn't putting up with that crap. We just go sit in parks and stuff. We knew better. Everybody knew better than to act crazy there. But in these rallies, there was still this rhetoric and these ideologies that were being spread. And while at the time I didn't question it at all, now it's so mainstream that everybody knows what you're talking about when you talk about there being more than two pronouns, right? Um, so part of it, I think, starts kind of from the ground up, but a lot of it too, it spreads and it gains traction through the media objecting its biasness and pushing certain narratives, as well as I was telling you before we got on here, I got in trouble today for citing actual politicians who are in support of child gender transitions, as well as states who currently have laws in place to protect these sorts of acts. And I was cited for misinformation. I appealed it. We'll see what happens, but I got in trouble for misinformation. That to me is just obviously
And
the social media
define for
company.
those viewing what getting in trouble entails, what that means. So they're not. Oh, what does that mean, right?
It can mean many different things. If you're monetized, your video can be demonetized. That's kind of the best case scenario, really. Worst case scenario is that you get suspended and you're not able to post anything at all for a couple of days. And the more you get in trouble, the longer those suspensions are. I haven't hit that level. I know that that's possible because I've been talking to other people who are posting similar content who have several 100,000 followers, and they've kind of expressed that that's the reason why they have 10, 20 accounts, because they keep getting in trouble for things that they're saying. So that's as far as the extent you can go. You can just, your account will be completely banned depending on the platform. I'm specifically speaking on TikTok here right now. But what I've experienced is I will be suspended from my going live for a week. I'll be suspended from commenting for 3 or 4 days. I'll be suspended from posting a video for several days if I appeal certain content and my appeal isn't approved. Now, I've gotten a lot approved, as I was telling you. I'd say probably 80% of my appeals are approved, but it also ends up throttling my content. Like if the video I posted this morning, it was actually, it looked like from the metrics, it was going to do pretty good, and then it got taken down. Now, even if my appeal is approved in, say, a day or two or whenever that happens, in the meantime, my video, if it goes back up, it's not going to be monetized in the way that it was before, and it's also not going to gain traction. So it's just another way to suppress certain viewpoints, in my opinion. And again, these are private companies, but kind of, I would ask kind of a similar question what you just did. Who's behind this and who's actually pushing these ideologies? Where is this stemming from? What does the government have to do with it? Or is it just people who are very far left that are monitoring all the content and everything's offensive to them that questions their narrative? It's probably a mixture of both, but
yeah. Well, I think that we can speculate, and I think that you and I both have an opinion on that, and I think that we're probably pretty close in what our opinion is on that too. But we were talking about, you and I don't necessarily, and I again, nobody in 511 does necessarily agree on every single thing that we ever say. We're mostly in agreement on a lot of things. Yeah. But I love the fact that we don't agree on some things because it brings out, free thinking, free speaking. In fact, Jared and I have even had conversations of having a reasonable, not, these screaming crazy people, but liberal on the show and say, hey, let's have a discourse, let's have a dialogue, because I think that's a lot of what America has gotten rid of, is being civil towards each other. Just because we disagree doesn't mean we have to hate each other.
Yeah. Well, the more inflammatory it gets in the discussion, the less positive outcome that you can actually get, even myself, again, I would say I'm pretty centered on most issues. I'm more centered on social issues, but I lean more right when it comes to like fiscal issues and such. But to the left, I'm far right, and I'm not at all. And I sit here and I agree with them on so many things. Exactly. And it's like, well, you could have never been woke because you're wearing that MAGA hat. It's like, dude, I had Bernie bumper stickers. I had Obama shirts. Come on. There was a point in my life where I was for those people too, and I was just as vocal. Like I told you earlier, I'm all in or I'm not there at all for it. But yeah. I there's definitely more need for conversation, and that would be one of the things that I'm You've probably seen some of my posts. When people pick at me, sometimes I pick back, but I try to make it a healthy balance between that and just having fun and providing information or a narrative or a story, where it's a little bit more gauging and has some sort of substance to it, because I want to help bridge that gap. Because I do understand where a lot of them are coming from or how they ended up. Perhaps I don't know their story, but I myself kind of have a general idea of how I ended up woke. And I had spoken with many other people, and I would say the quickest way, most simplest way to put it is a lot of people feel disenfranchised from different things that they've experienced within their lives. And I just think it's important to try to bridge all of those gaps and try to talk to people rather than framing the far left or the far right as both. Just don't talk to them, because that seems to be, if you talk to someone that's perhaps far right, and I know plenty, I don't seem them to be a big threat to America as I do the far left. But if you talk to someone far right, they don't want to talk to someone far left, and vice versa. But someone in the middle, there's tons of moderates in this country. There's tons of people like yourself. You're conservative. You're not far right. There's tons of people who are traditional Democrats. You're not a far left. And I think those people need to start being as vocal and as willing to have conversations as the people on both sides, because all these people do is yell at each other. It's not an actual conversation. And then you have everybody else in the middle trying to figure out what the heck's going on.
Well, and it's the people in the middle that actually really decide the entire election, at the end of the day. So those are the people that actually their voice should matter the most, because nobody on the right that's far right is going to move left, and nobody that's on the far left is going to move right. It's the people in the middle that really, and I think it's important. We talk about it on the show all the time, especially Jared and I, especially with some of the guests. And I think this is kind of the point you're making. Like, I don't vote Republican just because there's an R by their name and I didn't look into them, because is there a possibility at some point in the future that I might vote differently than that? Yeah. Depending on what the issues are. I would say for the most part, for my my entire lifetime that I can recall or think about, I've always voted on the right. I've always voted for the Republicans because their platform and what they say that they, and their track record that they've kind of shown that they follow are more in line with my values. However, I would also say that we've been in a state for a long time, and I think this is part of why a lot of people hate Trump, where it's you got the blue side and the red side, and it's really just part of the same coin. It's just it's a uniparty system when they just appear to be two different things when they're really not.
It took me a while, even after when I voted for Trump in 2020, I was voting against the Democratic Party, basically, is what I was doing. It wasn't because I thought Trump was great or anything. Again, I thought he was the lesser of the two evils, and he had done a couple of things that I thought were pretty good. But it wasn't until I would say the past year or so that I myself realized what you're just saying. There are two sides of the same coin. Donald Trump is not a Republican by any means, and he's using the GOP as a vessel. And I see now the pushback from what you would consider the far right against Trump. They don't like him either. He's quite moderate. So, I mean, that's been a cool thing to kind of come to the realization of. And it's like, okay, we got more problems than just the Democrats. They're loud and they're trying to implement a lot of crazy policies, but there's other people, like you were saying, on the right that's complicit in it, and not necessarily, they may not be pushing the same narrative, but they're not doing their jobs for the American people and pushing back on it like the American people who voted them into office intended them to do, if that makes sense, which tells me that they're part of that same system.
Yep. And, the thing that most people forget is Donald Trump was a Democrat most of his life.
Yeah. And he was buddy with Oprah and Clinton. And so
all of the ones that say they hate him now.
Yeah. He's bad because he's a billionaire, says another billionaire.
Right. Because and really, I think the truth is because he's not part of, as you like to say, the word that rhymes with cheapskate. That's the real reason they're against him.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Yeah. I don't even think his own campaign can control him. I think there's times where he's even just bitten himself in his own butt, He says some outlandish things
Oh, yeah.
sometimes, or some
Well,
perhaps
many people have
unsavory
said we
things.
just need to take away his cell phone so he can't tweet.
Yeah, that was the best though, honestly, looking at his Twitter feed. He's a funny dude. He really is. But yeah, if his campaign can't control him, and that's the feeling that I get, is that they would probably like him to fall in line a little bit better with the narrative that they're trying to give him, so he seems a little less, maybe unhinged, the way that the liberals would view him. But if they can't control him, I certainly don't think that the Republican Party is going to
Well,
control
the
him.
thing is, he's a real human being, and I've been many times had opportunities to see him speak in person, and he's just a real person, like a real human being. And like you get around a lot of these politicians, and I've been around plenty of them. They just seem plastic and fake, and I don't know if you've had that opportunity, Viv, but if you have, you'll see, like, you see one side that's on TV, but it's just a different presence when it's in person, especially the smaller the room that you're in with him. You're like, man, he just says it, your own, and I think that's why a lot of people like him. He reminds me of myself. He just says what's on his mind.
And I would prefer that. I would prefer someone to speak their mind, and maybe I disagree with them, rather than have to dissect everything that they're saying, because it's mostly lies. It's some narrative that's giving to them, or something that they're reading off a teleprompter, or perhaps they're being misleading or omitting something that would challenge their narrative. I mean, kind of the vibes I get from Kamala. I think she's a snake. That's the best way. The nicest way
At
I can.
best.
I think
that is
she's
the
a
nicest
snake.
way.
Yeah.
So speaking of Kamala and everything you say is a lie and reading off a teleprompter, we're getting into the second half of the show here. We wanted to break down the CNN interview, so we're gonna kind of roll that, and we're gonna play a little bit at a time and just kind of break down each answer as we get through it, and we'll continue to bring more of Viv's story as you guys continue to watch, and also real quick. Make sure we do this, Darius. If we can do this in the comments, and then do this on the banner as well. Vivian, where do you want people to go follow you at, so they can see your content?
TikTok is my biggest presence, and that's kind of where I'm spending most of my time right now, but as well as YouTube, Vivian Ivy on YouTube, and I'm trying to build up my Facebook. I'm trying to broaden my reach, just in case I go to TikTok jail, because that very well may happen. So
yeah, well, we're on every single platform too.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
What do you got? At Vivian Ivy, all one word?
Oh gosh, I think my YouTube's at Vivian Ivy, and then my TikTok is at Viv_Ivy. My Facebook would just be Vivian Ivy.
Okay, there we go. Just go ahead and do that, Darius, and then do both of them. Do the YouTube as well. We're gonna throw it out there so people can go follow you. Thank you, guys. We do a lot of collaboration stuff with Vivian as well. So once he gets that up, then we're gonna get right into the meat of the show, which is the CNN interview. So go ahead, Darius, and you can roll that.
Wells, thank you so much for sitting down with me and bringing the bus. Bus tour is well underway here in Georgia. You have less time to make your case to voters than any candidate in modern American history. The voters are really eager to hear what your plans are. If you are elected, what would you do on day one in the White House?
Go ahead and pause it.
Well,
So I think this, you know what this question reminds me of, Vivian? You remember when, I don't know if you remember this, but when they were trying to pass Obamacare,
Okay.
and the question, or the answer was, well, we have to pass it first and then we can tell you what's in it.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Like, we got Kamala here. She's like, it depends on what day it is. It depends on what day of the week. I'm gonna flip flop, and it depends on who's asking me the questions. And the other thing I want to point out about this interview, first of all, there couldn't have been a more friendly channel or network for her to do the interview on. She came on. She had the questions ahead of time. you guys will see as we get into this how, like, at best it was neutral, right? The interview. You saw the whole thing, didn't you, Viv?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So
it was hard to find. I will say it was hard to find. I went later that night. I wasn't watching it live on television. I went to YouTube, which seemed like a very rational place to go, to CNN's YouTube, to try to find the full-length video, and it was unavailable. And I know it's at least 3 days afterwards. It may be up there now, but for at least 3 days, CNN had not posted long form anywhere that I could find on the internet. So I found that quite disturbing. I finally found it from some third-party source that just recorded it on their television. So I watched it through someone else's TV.
Through someone else's cell phone.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, when Darius, if we can drop those links in the comments, or team, if you're out there, if we can drop those links in the comments, that would be great, so they can go and actually watch it. We found it in 3 parts on CNN. I believe it was directly on CNN's website, or not website, but their YouTube channel. The other thing I wanted to say about the interview in general, it's the friendliest network that she could have possibly done this on. She had the questions ahead of time. She had the answers ahead of time, pre-scripted. There was a few times where she had trouble actually finding which page of her notes to read the answer off of, and that's the other thing that I talked about with Joe Biden. The answers aren't their own. They're being told what to say. So that's why they can't recall at a moment's notice what they're supposed to say, because they don't actually know, because they're not actually their own beliefs.
Mm-hmm. They're unable to elaborate. If they're asked follow-up questions, I'll have to look into that, or we'll get back to you, or I can't share that to you. That seems to be very common.
Yeah. So go ahead, and Darius, and let's continue.
There are a number of things. I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the
This is the best example of a non-answer I've ever heard.
Of the American people, I think that people are ready for a new way forward, in a way that generations of Americans have been fueled by hope and by optimism. I think, sadly, in the last decade, we have had in the former president someone who has really been pushing an agenda and an environment that is about diminishing the character and the strength of who we are as Americans, really dividing our nation, and I think people are ready to turn the page on that.
So
Go
what
ahead
did
and
you do
pause it.
Day one, it's going to...
So, the other thing that stands out to me is, and would love to hear this from you, Viv, as someone who was your term, not mine, but I did adopt it from you, wokey, before. This is from my perspective as someone who never was a wokey, always a conservative. The mainstream media does this, but in this case, this is the liberal politician, Kamala Harris, gaslighting. Everything she just said is exactly what their party is doing.
Yeah. I think that her base doesn't care at all. I'll say that. And I wouldn't even say Kamala's base, just the far left people and people who just know that they're going to check that, Democrat box at the end of the day. They don't, to me, my former woke self would not have thought that was an odd answer at all. I would have thought, oh my gosh, hope. Yes. And I would have thought back to Obama's hope for a change. That was his whole spiel, was hope for the change. And she's talked about middle class. And I thought, well, that's really great. She recognized us, and she's kind of giving us a shout out. She really cares. And she framed Donald Trump as bad once again. And that's about all she would have had to say for me to be like, she's wonderful. I'm glad that she cares about all the things that I care about for me to vote for her. This would have been, several years back now, but I could definitely see former me not really having much of a problem with that. But now I look at it and I'm thinking, he's destroying America. What are you talking about? You're the one who are encouraging illegal immigrants to come in here and siphon all of our resources, make taxpayers put them up in hotels and give them food and cell phones and tablets and all sorts of other things, debit cards sometimes, depending on where you go, with just free cash assistance. And I would say that's definitely harmful to our country, as well as a lot of the gender transition stuff for children that they're pushing, as well as a lot of the rhetoric they're pushing against Donald Trump, calling him a dictator and saying that he wants to ban abortion, just straight up lying about that and trying to tie him to Project 2025. What are you talking about? That what I mean, if they want to talk about division, they need to stop that crap themselves, because it's kind of a double standard here at this point, because everything that they run off of is division. I don't know if you know who Tim Pool is. Do you know who Tim Pool is?
No.
So the Kamala he's a moderate. He's a libertarian. He's one of my favorite commentators. But I've kind of grown with him in a way. We both kind of grew towards Donald Trump. But the Kamala campaign recently in the past couple of days came out and said that he is far right and that he is trying to overthrow the federal government with Donald Trump. So he announced today that he's going to be seeking a lawsuit against them for misinformation. But I saw that and I thought, wow. They're not even just attacking the people who maybe you could even reasonably call far right, now we're attacking people who are moderates, and we're accusing them of trying to overthrow the government with Donald Trump and trying to tie everybody to Project 2025. So all that junk she just said in that interview, like you said, they're doing it, and they're accusing Trump and the MAGA supporters of the ones being guilty of it.
I love how well informed you are, Viv. Because you're like keep it top of mind all the time. You called out a few things that I think are super important. Number one is the immigration, which we're going to be doing at some point in the next week or two or three, whenever we get the opportunity to do it, an immigration special. But cool. we were kind of going back and forth a little bit about over the weekend about the TDA gang and Aurora, Colorado, and the speculation of what's going on there, and supposedly, which is interesting. And again, I'm not going to, because we're going to continue watching the interview here, but supposedly they've taken over entire apartment complexes, but then you see everybody online and on social media saying that that's true, and then you see the mainstream media saying that's not true. And then you see a lot of people online, which I'm not sure whether I agree with, if I think it's true or not, because I'm like, oh, it's an interesting idea, but I'm not even sure, like, that I even would necessarily like to see that happen anyway. But they're saying, oh, Hell's Angels are gonna go and fight them, and then mainstream media saying, oh, that's not true. But basically you got two gangs. Because that's what Hell's Angels is, a gang. They're a criminal enterprise that's going to go fight this other criminal enterprise. And we're as what I can say, as collectively as a society, we're seeing a certain percentage, which is more than it should be, of people that are cheering for vigilantism and cheering for this gang to go fight this other gang. Whether it's true or not is kind of irrelevant. But that we've devolved to the point where it's almost anarchy, and we're cheering for anarchy. And like my question that I posed to people on social media, I think you probably saw the video, Viv, was have we gone this far that we're cheering for anarchy, and is it something that the powers that be actually want, because maybe potentially they could implement a police state? And it's just crazy to think about all that stuff that's going on.
Yeah. I've thought about that often, especially as someone who I really started thinking about that because I live outside of Seattle and I saw the Ho Chaz Chop thing happen. The result of that is that we're about 350 Seattle police short, as well as a couple hundred within the King County. Now, some of them were only part-time or volunteers and have just backed off, so it's not like they were, full-time police officers, but either way, it's not good. And so our police presence is short. So I wonder if, you're chipping away at the local police, you're chipping away at, law enforcement officers that live within the communities that they're patrolling, especially our, sheriff's departments and stuff. And we're potentially going to have to replace them with some sort of federal presence if we start having a lot of gang activity in these cities, because now we know for sure we can't even handle our own crime within these cities. If we have foreign gangs coming in and committing crimes, like supposedly in Colorado, we don't have the police presence, then what's to stop the Fed boys from coming in and kind of taking over? And I know it's conspiratorial, but it seems like it's more likely day by day, I would say.
Yeah. So let's continue with that interview, Darius.
going to be about, one, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy. I've already laid out a number of proposals in that regard, which include what we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families, for example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life to help them buy a car
go ahead and
seat,
pause
to
it.
help them buy.
So, Viv, I wanted to point out a couple things here. And number one, she's saying that she's going to extend the child tax credit to $6,000. Didn't Vance say that he was going to do something in that regard as well?
I believe so. I think his was, if you look at the actual, don't quote me here, it was like 3,500 or 4,500 per kid, in the actual like MAGA agenda. If you'll look on the website, that's what I read.
I think I had heard it was
maybe 3 or
actually
4
like
days
10
ago.
grand.
Oh, I've not read that high.
Yeah,
I've not read that high.
I think I heard somewhere
but-
that it was like 10 grand.
Oh, well, I mean, you might be right. What I was reading, I think it was, they call it like the official GOP plan or whatever. It's on the Trump website. And
Not Project
they had
2025?
No, wasn't that. But they had additionally paired it with extending the TCJA, the 2017 Trump's tax cuts. So those are set to expire at the end of 2025, just because of a lot of, the Byrd rule and budget committees and those things. So they're saying that they're going to extend those and make those permanent. That's their plan, as well as couple it with another child tax credit on top of it. I mean, you may be right. They may have announced that it's more than what I had read, but I do know it's something that they're including on top of extending those tax cuts. So that's another thing I'm kind of concerned about with Kamala. Like, okay, great, the $6,000 tax credit. I'm not going to knock it or say that it's a bad thing. But what about in 2025 when the TCJA rolls back and like 93% of Americans' taxes go up? What about that?
And the other thing she mentioned that I think she glossed over most of it, first of all, and gave mostly a non-answer, but the little bits you catch in there, if you're paying attention and you actually know what's going on, Viv and I do a pretty good job, I think, paying attention and actually being informed of what's actually going on.
Some may call it obsessive, but yeah.
Well, I consider it part of my job, so
yeah, I like it. I've been duped before. I want to know what's going on.
Yeah, but I think that one of the things that stood out to me about what she said was bringing down costs, right? So first of all, I think it is important to preface what I'm about to say with, we've seen skyrocketing costs because of many things, including COVID and the shutdowns and everything else. But we've also seen the Green New Scam and the Inflation Perpetuation Act that they're calling the Inflation Reduction Act. I renamed it to Inflation Perpetuation Act. That has caused everything to go up except for wages have come down in terms of real wages, right? So while our costs are going up, our wages are going down. But don't worry, she's going to implement some policies that might bring down costs. So, well, that sounds like a good thing. Actually, what she's going to do, and if you think about this, crap rolls downhill, right? And I say all the time, and anybody who actually pays attention will say something very similar, if not the exact same thing: follow the money, right? So what she's essentially saying is that she's going to implement price control measures. And did you recently do some content on that too, Viv?
Yeah, I've covered the price caps, and I ran some scenarios through AI about what our likelihood of that causing food shortages, as well as businesses going out of business, the likelihood of those types of scenarios, as well as have, informed myself different countries where they have implemented these sorts of things and it's ended poorly. So I've been posting videos on those sorts of things. Sometimes they get shadow banned, sometimes they don't.
But essentially, what she's saying is actually a communist policy. It's not a capitalistic.
No, it's anti-free market, so it can't be considered capitalistic at all. And if you look at communism, it's also anti-capitalism. So yeah, it's probably something that she learned in her childhood some story time that her daddy told her since he was a Marxist, and now she's bringing it to us, and she's going to bless us with it, and we're just going to kind of roll the dice and see what happens, as far as I'm concerned, because I don't
And
think it's
that's
going
an
to be as good
interesting
as what
story
she
that
thinks it's going to be.
That's an interesting story that doesn't get out. Which I think is important for people to realize and know. Her daddy was a Marxist economist.
Mm-hmm.
So
They don't. I've not heard any major source when they're speaking about her or even her policy. Even some of these left-wing channels, the mainstream channels, have even kind of hinted to their audiences, maybe price caps aren't a very good idea. We're not a big fan of this, and have referenced different times in history, and recently so even in the past 20 years or so, where it's ended poorly, or at least caused more problems than solutions within economies. And they never ever speak on her dad being a Marxist in any scenario whatsoever. You kind of have to
Well,
look
they don't
at
want
some
anybody to
right-wing
know
stuff
that.
and dig it up. Well, it's as bad as what it sounds. That's why.
yeah, exactly. So let's continue, Darius.
Baby clothes, a crib. There's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing, a big issue in our country right now. So there are a number of things on day one.
Okay, so pause it again.
What about you?
Okay, so what is this affordable housing thing, Viv?
Oh, it was at 20,000.
25,000, right?
25,000, yeah, tax credit. Which, I've been trying to find more information on what is this actually going to entail, how are you going to implement this, who's eligible, those sorts of things, and I've not found much information on it.
from
That's
what I've
something
seen
I want
about-
to know more about.
What I've seen about who's eligible is it's actually mostly for the illegal immigrants.
Really?
It's people that have never purchased a home or any of their previous relatives, any of their lineage have ever purchased a home in the United States.
So that's a stipulation. It's not even just first-time buyers. It's your parents haven't owned a home.
Right.
Wow,
Right.
I didn't know that. I thought it was just a first-time buyer thing. I thought, okay, this sounds interesting. I need to know more about it. But I've been on the whole price caps train.
Yeah, and so the other part of that is in California, I believe, and you guys feel free to fact check me if I get any of this wrong. But there is $150,000 tax credit that is geared similarly. For $150,000, not just tax credit, but like credit, like they'll put it towards the purchase price of the home. But the other thing, and this is ultimately where they want to go, because the government wants to own and control everything. That's where they're going with this. So they get to take a certain percentage of equity in the home. So as the home appreciates, they will get a percentage of that back.
And this is actively going on in California right now?
There was a lottery because there wasn't enough. They only had like a certain number of this that they were giving out.
Okay.
And so they had to run a lottery to see who would be able to get it, because let me give you, for instance, these are not the exact numbers because I can't remember the exact numbers, but there was like 2,000 that they were going to give out, and like 150,000 people applied for them. So they were like, oh well, we got to do a lottery to see who wins, basically.
Okay, so it already happened.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's in process right now. And
Wow.
and this is the policies being brought to us by our great governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who and what's interesting is if you think about it, Gavin actually would have been a better choice for the liberals. Like, I think they would have liked him better, and you can tell me your opinion on this, Viv, but they would have liked him better than Kamala. But I think Gavin was like, no, this train's going off a cliff. I don't want any part of it.
That's hard to tell. I think most still would have favored Kamala, just simply for the fact that she's a woman, and a lot of their policies, as far as what I've seen, seem to be pretty similar. They tend to fall in line on a lot of the same things. And even when I was far left, the sleazy car salesman vibe still didn't do it for me, really. I don't think I would. I still don't see a former me liking Gavin, but maybe I'm wrong about some of these other folks here in this present day and age. But I do think Kamala probably has a better stab at it than he does.
Okay, got it. So let's continue, Darius.
Well, I'm excited about this agenda too. As I said, the idea of inspiring America to what can be, and I think many of these things that the vice president's proposing are
Is
things
that,
that we share.
go ahead and pause it, Darius. Is that not knowing what the context is of what he just said, Vivian? What can be, like what he's actually saying there, knowing the context of that, and I think you know the context of it, right? Tell me if you don't. Is that not one of the scariest things that can come out of their mouth?
Yeah, and I think he's further from my point of view is that he's further left than she is. So, I think there's a lot that can be from this presidency, but he's clearly going to back her on any sort of anything that comes out of her mouth for sure.
What is the expression? Doing away with what has been to see what can be, or something along those lines, right? Mm-hmm. You know, that is almost a direct quote out of the Marxist playbook.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Okay. That's what you're hinting at here. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And
he's a communist as far as I'm concerned. Like everything I've heard him say is further left than her. I don't know if you've caught the video where he's saying that he doesn't believe in freedom of speech because there's a such thing as misinformation as well as hate speech. And then a few days later, it's followed up by him being called out from all the things he's misspoken on. And he goes, "I'm just so passionate. I just misspoke." It's like, well, by your own logic and standard, you could be punished by a future law for misspeaking passionately because it's misguiding, right? It's double standard all the way, but he's very radical.
Well, I always say the misinformation is just the information that misdirects you from the direction that they want you to go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. It seems like that as far as big tech and mainstream media. That's for sure.
For sure. Okay, go ahead, Darius.
Child tax credit is one we know that reduces childhood poverty by a third. We did it in Minnesota to have a federal partner in this. Unbelievable, I think, in the impact that we can make.
You talked about, you call it the opportunity economy. You are well aware that right now many Americans are struggling. There's a crisis of affordability. Yeah. One of your campaign themes is we're not going back. But I wonder what you say to voters who do want to go back when it comes to the economy specifically, because their groceries were less expensive, housing was more affordable when Donald Trump was president.
Well, let's start with the fact that when Joe Biden and I came in office, during the height of a pandemic, we saw over 10 million jobs were lost. Literally, we were all tracking the numbers. Hundreds of people a day were dying because of COVID. The economy had crashed. In large part, all of that because of mismanagement by Donald Trump of that crisis. When we came in, our highest priority was to do what we could to rescue America. And today, we know that we have inflation at under 3%. A lot of our policies have led to the reality that America recovered faster than any wealthy nation around the world. But you are right. Prices, in particular for groceries, are still too high. The American people know it, I know it, which is why my agenda includes what we need to do to bring down the price of groceries. For example, dealing with an issue like price gouging. What we need to do to extend the child tax credit to help young families be able to take care of their children in their most formative years. What we need to do to bring down the cost of housing. My proposal includes what would be a tax credit of $25,000 for first-time home buyers, so they can just have enough to put a down payment on a home, which is part of the American dream and their aspiration, but do it in a way that allows them to actually get on the path to achieving that goal and that dream.
So you have been vice president for 3.5.
Okay, so did you see the video, Viv, that was on circulating social media where they asked her that question? They like spliced it up, and they when they asked her that same first question, she was like, "Next question, please."
No, I hadn't seen that one.
It was pretty
That
funny.
would have been a better answer than what she just gave, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, she's just reiterating basically, the same things that we've been talking about, and the $25,000 first-time home buyer credit, the price gouging, and you said you're pretty informed on the price gouging issue, right?
I'm becoming more and more informed. Like I said, I've been doing a lot of research, especially using AI, Grok, ChatGPT, having them run different scenarios. Look at, they're saying price gouging. So I've been looking at the actual profits that companies have been making versus the profits that grocery stores make. They're a lot lower profit margins than I ever even would have thought of. They one of their main things I think is referencing PepsiCo, and they had record profits. Okay, they did, but they also had like 50,000 more employees, as well as their operating cost is well over $100 billion a year, and they made 8 billion last year. It's like I don't think that the gouging is as big as an issue as what they're making it seem. I think that they're trying to point a finger from faulty governance more than anything. But yeah, I'm quite concerned about it. So I've been trying to read up and know the statistics, the outcomes, and the actual profits that these companies are making. Would it even potentially make sense in any world that we live in for them to do price gouging, price caps on to these companies? And so far, my opinion on it, from everything that I've read, looking at data and numbers, the answer is probably no. It's probably going to be way more harmful than helpful.
What's AI's opinion on it?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so specifically, I asked it to, one of the scenarios that I ran was I asked it to take the last like 100 years that it could find in countries that had implemented price caps on groceries specifically, and to kind of read up on it and then tell me what the percentage of a negative outcome would be. And the ChatGPT said 86% chance, and Grok said 83% chance that we were going to see drastic cuts in food supply. The food supply, there was going to be a lot of food shortages. That was going to be the number one thing we were going to be facing, as well as we would absolutely have to counteract. There was almost, it was saying that there was like over a 90% chance that we would have to throw a lot of government subsidies at these companies to keep them from collapsing at, in case scenarios, because of the revenue that would be lost, as well as them just not being able to keep up with the market, or perhaps it don't even make sense for them to produce anymore. So the government has to subsidize that somehow. So it does not look pretty, and I think AI is a lot smarter than I am, and it can read a lot faster than I can. It can read 50 articles in 5 minutes and spit out an answer with data and sources and all sorts of things. So I've been relying heavily on that, and it seems kind of doomsday if they were to be implemented. And even, in those scenarios, again, that's with us subsidizing these companies at the end of the day with taxpayer dollars. And I'm not sure where this money is going to come from unless they do the 25% unrealized gains. That's another story. But
yeah, that's completely crazy.
AI definitely, AI, again, I'm much smarter than I am. It kind of doomsday type scenario. It leads nowhere good.
So she also mentioned how they brought back all these jobs and everything. They haven't actually brought back any jobs that didn't previously exist, aside from government jobs. They have expanded the government, which is never a good thing. And then she quoted some statistics, and who knows where she's getting her statistics at? But statistics, you can manipulate them in all sorts of ways, however you want to manipulate them. And what I can say is, we look at the price of all of our groceries, and the way that those have gone up, and the price of our vehicles, the price of our fuel, the amount of money we have in our pockets left over at the end of the day, and you can shove all the statistics in the world at me, and I can tell you at the end of the day, I had more money in my pocket in 2016. In 2018, in 2020, than I have now, and that's what Americans care about.
And I think most people can relate to that. It's really hard to convince people that go to the grocery store once a week and pay their rent every month and pay their light bill every month that they're crazy. And I think that's one of the biggest slaps in the face. Honestly, they try to be like, they frame themselves as these heroes that care about everybody, right? And we got to carry about the man that's fallen behind, the person who needs our help. We got to give them a helping hand, but at the same time, they talk trash about those people consistently, because that's the way I interpret it. If you're telling these people that they're delusional, these people that are like, hey, my life is, it's getting harder to make ends meet, and you're telling them that they're delusional, you don't care about them. And while you're simultaneously saying that you do, that's why I say that she's a snake, you know?
Yeah.
It's very
Well,
belittling and degrading, because it's something that is tangible, it's provable. I don't know if you've seen the trend, but I even did it myself. I compared I do online grocery shopping, and I'll do delivery sometimes because we're kind of out here a little bit. And I took one of my grocery carts from a year ago. Actually, it had been like a 9-month difference. This was about a month ago. It had been about a 9-month difference. And the groceries had went up 120% in Washington State, at least from where I'm ordering them at Safeway. I did it again at Walmart, and they had went up almost 100%. And I posted this on my TikTok. And that's just something you can't argue. That's not arguable. You can't say that you're crazy, this doesn't exist, this didn't happen. It's like, and this is a trend people are doing, and they're not doing it for fun. They're doing it because it sucks to go buy groceries and to pay your rent and to pay your electric bill right now.
So, you know, the thing is, they're constantly gaslighting and lying to the American people. And I don't know if you saw this, but Gavin Newsom came out, I don't know how many months ago, in the past, let's say 4 months at least anyway, if not even more recently than that, and tried to tell people, and I'm like, I pay my electrical bill. I've lowered electrical prices. For who? Who are you? What are you talking? You mean the people that installed solar? You didn't lower their electrical prices. They just paid for something different, installed solar. We don't have solar on our house, and the prices are not cheaper than they were a year ago. I can guarantee you that. But Viv, I know we're at the end of our time for today. I wish we could have gotten further into this debate, and we might, and we'll talk about this offline. But let us know if you guys want us to continue to do that, and we'll continue to do it in the future. We might even come back on Friday and talk about it some more. But guys, you're going to be seeing a lot more of Viv here on the 511 channel, and I'm excited to have you as part of our group and a collaborator with us. So
thank you for
Viv.
the invite. I'm going to write down the dates you gave me.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day.